Tacticus is an incredibly deep game with many different modes to master. Today we'll take a look at guild raids, focusing on who to level and how to use them. When you first join a new guild, there are a couple of modes opened up to you. One is Guild Wars, where you get to defend and fight against other teams by attacking opponent bases on a map, but the one that we're going to deep dive into today is Guild Raids. This is where you and your guildmates take down huge, immensely powerful lore characters in order to gain guild credits that you can spend in the guild shop. As of the time of this video, we have 11 different bosses to face. Each of them has a specific set of moves that they make, but also weaknesses that you can exploit if you know how to deal with them. And to counter them, there are 3 main types of teams that work best right now. Each of them is centered around one of these characters: Ragnar, Exitor-Rho, and Neurothrope. And although their teammates can change depending on which boss they're facing, these are definitely the linchpin of each of the teams. Ragnar leads a multi-hit melee team that utilizes his War Howl active ability to get a massive start to a battle before following up with his passive ability, Saga of the Warrior Born, which lets him keep charging around after mobile bosses, boosting his attack every time. Exitor-Rho leads an all-mechanical team that takes advantage of his optimized gate passive ability to make an attack every time another mechanical unit hits the boss. His Cord Claw active ability then boosts that damage massively for a couple of rounds. And Neurothrope leads a Psyker team which preys on his passive ability, Neuroparasite. This infects enemies with a nasty parasite that continually powers up every time the enemy takes psychic damage. And all of these teams require a lot of work to make sure you're maneuvering correctly, timing abilities, and surviving damaging attacks from the bosses to make sure that you're hitting scores to bring you higher up the guild raid leaderboard. Regardless of which team you pick, I would recommend maxing out these characters when you're building a team around them. That means bringing them at the very least to Diamond 3 with level 11 equipment and maxed out skills. The extra damage they'll get is quite incredible when you do this, and once you've maxed them out, you can focus on bringing the rest of each team up to a similar place. As always though, I want to tell you that although these are the most damaging teams when you're min-maxing, the most damaging teams you will have are the ones that you have the most levels already in. Teams like Orcs are more than capable of putting up excellent scores in guild raids, and so it really depends on what you're trying to do. Don't be afraid to experiment, and definitely don't be afraid to have fun doing it. Just before we get into the video, I have a free set of Google Sheets that pulls all your guild raid data from the game, turns it into easily digestible data and charts so you can see exactly how you and the rest of your guild are not only performing from season to season, but also how you're improving. The link is in the comments below, and I also have a video going over how to set them up. Although one thing to note is that due to Snowprint protecting us, your guild leader has to be the one to run them. Moving on to the meat of the video, and we'll start with the Space Wolf hero of the multi-hit team, Ragnar. As we said, he leads his team of melee champions by war howling and then just constantly charging after enemies, hitting increased damage when he does so. And we'll start by looking at the different bosses the multi-hit team can face. Here you're trying to find bosses that move around unpredictably. Often they'll be the tougher bosses around because your team can take it, and if they fall, they usually have final vengeance for one last swing at the guild raid boss. And they are Ghazghkull, Belisarius Cowl, Magnus the Red, Avatar, and probably the newest boss Riptide, although we need much more exploration there. And if you are coming up against any of these, especially the level 5 bosses, then do take the multi-hit team. And if we look at his preferred teammates, these are quite varied, as we have a lot of fast-moving melee characters, especially those with a rapid assault trait, and they all fit nicely into his team. There's no perfect answer here, but I'm going to walk you through some of the best characters, and this will give you a bunch of options to try out. We'll start by looking at characters that deal serious damage when in a team with Ragnar, and then look at the characters that can boost them. Usually you want to aim for 2 boosting characters and 3 damaging characters. And it would be crazy to talk about damaging characters and not mention the hardest hitting champion in the game, Karn. He is the perfect ally to Ragnar with his rapid assault trait and betrayer passive that lets him run around attacking everyone on top of his insanely hard hits. Snotflogga is next up, and this green guy is great in a bunch of different ways, from pooping grots onto the battlefield that deal with spawns, to dealing extra damage with his Beast Slayer trait that hits big targets extra hard, and of course his Get Stuck In trait that deals extra hits when 2 orcs or 4 support characters are adjacent to the bosses. Finally, we have a new character joining the team, Carrion, and he is another rapid assault character who deals multiple attacks every round with his passive Legacy of Combat, but also hits harder and harder as the battle goes on due to his Martial Inspiration active ability. And Carrion is turned into a wrecking ball if he's paired up with the first of our boosting characters, Trajan, whose passive Legendary Commander adds more hits to characters if he stood next to the enemies every time an active ability is used in a round. So stagger those actives and laugh as you hit insane amounts of damage. Banshee will be familiar to anyone that's faced Ragnar in Tournament Arena, as his Inspired to Greatness lets Ragnar Warhowl twice in one round, and that means he deals even more damage. Then we have 3 golden oldies, Eldrion, Athana, and Marneus Calgar, who have been part of this team from the very beginning. Eldrion's Doom ability boosts all damage as long as he stands 2 hexes away from the enemy, and that can seriously add up over the course of a fight. For Athana, you just stay close to the melee champions and their Path of Command passive will increase their crit chance. More crits means more damage. And for Marneus Calgar, if you keep your troops close to him, then his Rites of Battle will buff your damage throughout the fight, and any Imperial troops will get even more than others. Dante is the other character that can fit well into this team with his passive ability, Lord of the Host, that increases rapid assault character damage, as well as adding an additional hit when friendlies are below 50% health. Then the final character I want to mention here is Helbrecht, and he is a pocket pick which is pulled out specifically against Magnus, as his passive ability, Destroy the Witch, buffs melee attackers against Psykers, and Magnus is one of the biggest Psykers out there. In terms of machines of war, it really depends on the boss. For Belarius Cowl, take Forge Fiend to kill the spawns before they trigger Cowl. For Magnus, take Biovore so that you can lead the spawns away from your team. And then for the rest, I usually just take Galatian. Now let's take a look at how to play the team. Just before we begin, I want to be super clear that we won't see 100% perfect play today. The theory is there, but the practical is often lacking, especially when it comes to my play style. I rush so I don't bore you, but as always, going fast usually means going slower and making tiny mistakes. But the goals for this team are simple. You want to Warhowl in turn 1, and then constantly be charging at the enemy, beating them down. I've taken Carrion here instead of Snotflogga, specifically because the Grots can trigger Gazgul's Prophet of Gork and Mork ability, which reduces the damage massively for the last characters that are attacking him, especially when you haven't killed the sub-bosses. Some people will take Athana or Calgar here, but I just love showing off the new gold guy, even though we would usually be pairing him with Trajan. At the start of the battle, we simply move everyone up into range, and although Ragnar could make a hit here, we specifically don't want to waste his rapid assault damage, and so we hold him back until we've Warhowled. That is an important lesson straight away. Banshee re-triggers it with his Inspired to Greatness active, then you try and keep everyone out the way of Gazgul's charge, and you start swinging. In round 3, it's the same principle. Just make sure you're hitting Gazgul with the hardest hitters first due to his Prophet of Gork and Mork ability. Also make sure that Eldrion is brought into position 2 and you don't forget him. He has to be 2 hexes away from the enemy. Round 4 continues with more of the same. You move Eldrion into position, everyone else gets up to him and then starts poking. And finally, round 5 finishes with another load of damage on the big green chump. So there isn't much here that's complicated, especially against Gazgul. He's actually a great boss to be training your Ragnar multi-hit team against, and then you can start playing around with the other more complicated bosses like Avatar or Magnus the Red, who just won't stand still and let you hit them. Final recommendation here is that you pick up 5 of the champions I mentioned and level them up. Don't try and level all of them up, because it's better to focus on having 2 or 3 guild raid teams than having one amazingly diverse multi-hit team. Next up is Exitor-Rho, who leads a mostly mechanical team that will help him to swing those fists like a windmill, racking up ridiculous damage, and all for quite a cheap leveling price. The best guild raid bosses to face are the ones that bring predictability. If you can work out their movement patterns, then you probably should be taking the mechs, because their damage is the highest overall out of 3 teams. So the guild raid bosses you want to windmill against are Screamer Killer, Rogaldorn, Zarek, Hive Tyrant, and Tervigon. And Exitor's teammates are a lot more straightforward, as it's pretty much his AdMech team, except swapping Cygex for Shosil. And Tangida is one of the most important characters here. His Control Edict passive will fill the battlefield with Skitarii while he's in his Protector Imperative stance. Then he will use his active ability Doctrina Imperatives to swap stances to the Conqueror stance, which not only boosts the damage of all adjacent mechanical units, but also triggers them to attack again when Tangita does. His best buddy is Actus because of his passive ability Galvanic Field, which triggers a surrounding unit to immediately attack when he repairs it, which means Tangita gets to fire yet again, and then all the mechs around him fire again. If Actus uses his active ability Defended Fine Work, then he will repair everyone around him, and because of his passive, that also triggers them to attack again. Honestly, it's madness to watch. But before you get swinging, you start with Vitruvius and his passive ability Master Annihilator. This lets all characters that you're attacking the boss with score an extra hit, which means even more damage from everyone swinging. And the final piece of the puzzle is Shosil, whose drones are mechanical, and so every round, once you have 3 of them out, then that's another bunch of attacks that sets Exitor-Rho off in punching. And if you're just leveling up and don't quite have Vitruvius or maybe Shosil ready, then Eldrion, Aleph Null and Revas are decent replacements, but will lack the overall punch of these two. Whatever happens, you should be prioritizing Tangita and Exitor-Rho. Then Actus can be brought up to a level where he can at least survive the whole battle, and you should be good to go. The main machines of war that you want to take are Biovor and Galatian. Biovor is useful for Rogaldorn Tank and Zarek. With the Rogaldorn Tank, you use it to pull the AI around, and especially to try and block your characters from being suppressed by the mortar team. Then for Zarek, it's to try and attract him down from his throne, then to block his movement once you have him in place. And with Galatian, you just want to be able to use his Eternal Duty as quickly as possible to bring him onto the battlefield close to Tangita and Actus, and this blocks the boss from moving and deals insane amounts of damage. And the mechanical team is not only the hardest hitting out of all 3 teams, but when it comes to strategy, it's the easiest one to use. The goals are simple: get Exitor-Rho in range, fill the map with Tangita, Skitarii, and then constantly beat the enemy. There are different maps, and you always want to make sure Exitor-Rho finds higher ground than Screamer Killer. For this map, it means starting Exitor-Rho here specifically, so that you can close onto Screamer Killer and keep him on the low ground. Move everyone else up as best you can, trigger Shosil's active, and move to the next round. And in the next round, positioning becomes important. You want Tangita on a side with plenty of room. One note here, I should have used Vitruvius first to trigger his Master Annihilator passive, but it isn't a huge mistake. Now make sure that Exitor-Rho is on high ground. That means he goes onto the barbed wire, but he's a solid mech and he can take it. We use Actus Repair on Tangita, and that gets us 2 Skitarii that'll deal with those pesky barb gaunts next round. We hit with everyone else and move on to the next round. At the start of round 3, we're looking for a position for Galatian to come on to the board. You want him to be high up as well, but near Tangita, and there isn't a natural position for him, so we're going to have to move around a little bit to find it. Now we just continue as before, filling up the battlefield with Skitarii, and then ending the round. And now we're fully prepared. Round 4 is where the real fun begins. Once everyone finishes their attacks, you can start triggering Exitor-Rho's Cord Claw. Next, we'll move Shosil out of the way and move Actus into the space left behind. We use Tangita's Doctrina Imperatives active to switch stances to the Conqueror Imperative, which will re-trigger all the mechs around him. Then we use Actus's Defend the Divine Work active to trigger everyone around him, which then, of course, triggers everyone around Tangita as well. Then we follow up by using Tangita to do some more serious damage, triggering everyone around him again. It's absolutely ridiculous. And in the last round, everything happens in the same way. We just watch Exitor-Rho swinging around, and eventually even killing Screamer Killer with over 1 million damage to this boss. So you can see why Exitor-Rho is a really easy team to use. And because of the amount of bosses you can hit and the ease of their leveling, I actually really recommend this as the first team that you build up for guild raids. It will bump you up the scoreboard quite a lot, and when you hit that first 10 million plus damage in a season, it's an incredibly good feeling. And so we finish off today with a Neurothrope team, and this is one that anyone watching the fantastic Alien Earth TV show will absolutely love, because it's all about infesting enemies with little parasitic aliens. And you might be wondering which bosses are left now that we've covered nearly all of them already. Well, the biggest challenge for both the multi-hit team and mechanical team is Mortarion, and this is where Neurothrope team really comes to life. Like the Exitor-Rho team, there are a lot less options than the multi-hit team. Generally, all you want to take with you is 5 fire and psychers. And first up is Abraxas, and this Thousand Sun helps to add a ton of parasites to the boss with his active ability Malefic Maelstrom. That's because when you cast up his Pink Horrors and Screamers of Change, until the end of the round they all deal psychic damage, which adds 1 parasite each time. So if you've positioned correctly, the minimum is 3 parasites added very early in the battle, and his passive Infernal Pax is then great because if you stand a Chaos Troop near him, then they add an additional psychic damage hit, which really boosts that damage to the max. Ahriman is the next key component of this team, and one of the main reasons for that is his ability to set the battlefield on fire and then boost the damage of anyone attacking someone stood on it. This all comes from his passive ability, Psychic Stalk, which boosts all flame or psychic attacks, providing they're made against enemies stood on hexes that are on fire. And finally, his Doombolt active just sends a massive amount of damage, especially when there are a lot of hexes on fire, as each one adds another hit of psychic damage. You will all usually know Yazagor as the catapult to Abraxas, firing him into the enemy and letting him spawn double the damage of Pink Horrors and Screamers of Change that he usually does. However, although you can do this, especially if Yazagor is lower level and won't survive the battle, the better use for him is to use his active Sorceress Facade on Neurothrope later in the battle, and that's because it lets the Flying Shrimp deal an almighty hit. So don't waste it too early. Last up, it's not a Psyker, but an Adepta Sororitas hitwoman, Rosita, who absolutely comes in clutch against Mortarion. Her passive, Condemner Strike, deals massive amount of damage against Psykers. Then her active ability, Brazier of Holy Fire, sets everything on fire and deals lots of damage against immune demons, which Mortarion is. She is made to fight this boss. And outside of these, you can use Eldryon again to boost and deal Psyker damage, or Zybia also can fit in by using her active ability Mind Control to boost Neurothrope's damage for a couple of rounds, but generally you're going to want to stick with the ones I've listed above. And the machine of war you want to pick is simply the Exorcist. It works incredibly well with flames due to its active ability, Thrice Blessed Conflagration. This boosts the damage done by friendly units against enemies stood on fire hexes, and you can boost each of your units by the end of the battle, 1 round at a time, which really adds a lot of damage by the end. The goals for the Neurothrope team are a little bit more complicated. You start by buffing a different person with Exorcist every round. You keep Neurothrope away from the enemy, otherwise his close combat weakness is triggered and that reduces his damage. You try and keep your enemy on fire as much as possible, and you keep piling on those parasites. And because their main guild raid boss is Mortarion, we can be quite specific with the instructions here. Mortarion will always aim for the biggest clump of your team, so try and keep Neurothrope isolated as much as possible. And Mortarion will really hurt anyone starting next to him, so try and spread yourselves out around him. So in round 1, we move up specifically into these positions because Mortarion is attracted to the group of 3 and Neurothrope is left safely on the side. In round 2, we start the round, as we will with every round, by using the Exorcist active to boost the damage against enemies on fire hexes. This lasts for a few rounds, so you don't need to keep putting it onto the same character. Neurothrope kicks off the battle by using his Spirit Leech active. This adds 2 parasites on Mortarion straight from the beginning, and lets the others start to add their parasites. Then you move everyone out of Mortarion's Lantern attack, and I've set him on fire with Ahriman here, but I could have fired Ahriman after Abraxas to get 1 extra horror, not that they last long anyway. Then you trigger Abraxas's horrors. In round 3, you start with Exorcist, and you have to remember this, ideally using Exorcist's ability on someone that stood next to Mortarion, and then Exorcist will also do some damage to him as well. Then move everyone into place. Here I should have moved Abraxas next to Ahriman to get the extra damage from his attack, of course. It also would have saved Neurothrope later from being suppressed. You hit everything, and then Neurothrope goes last to make sure that he does the most amount of damage after everyone's added a parasite to Mortarion. At the start of round 4 is where he suppresses Neurothrope sadly, and that was a shame because this is a great round otherwise. It's also an incredibly important one where we will use a lot of actives to really pile on the damage. As always, start with the Exorcist, buff your most damaging character that you still have left, get everyone into place, and now we're going to use Yazagor's active on Neurothrope, which will then let him hit for extra damage. We'll also use Rosita's active to further increase that damage, and now we're going to Doombolt with Ahriman, and because there are so many hexes on fire, he really hits hard. Then we hit hard with Neurothrope. And of course, at the start of round 5, we can see that I should have separated Neurothrope, and so his close combat is triggered, but with us being able to move him to the high ground, he's still gonna hit hard. Everyone else lays in, and by now you'll already have reached that maximum of 15 parasites on Mortarion, and then Neurothrope finishes off. So not the cleanest of rounds, a couple of minor positioning mistakes, but you can see how much more complicated this team is than the other two teams, and so it needs a lot of practice in order to be perfect. If you want to keep up with the latest teams and who the biggest guilds in Tacticus are using for each boss, then I can thoroughly recommend the excellent infographics from Terminus Maximus. Just before the beginning of each Rage season, you will find his work in the Hobby Hub, in-game, or on Reddit. Each slide is an absolute goldmine of information to help keep you up to date with the changes in the teams. Most recently, he's also been adding epic level bosses, and he always shows the next set of bosses we're going to be facing at the bottom of the slide, so you can start leveling your teams up in preparation. And now it's over to you. What little things did I miss this time around? Because every video teaches me as much about Tacticus as it does me trying to share with all of you. So definitely take some time to read the most popular comments around. And finally, have you found any other teams which suit your playstyle and can take you to the top of your guild raid sheets? And either way, let me know in the comments below.